described as extra before, but I like that. I'll take it. Thank you so much for being with me, folks. I got a clicker up here. Perfect. And I appreciate your time today. I know I'm in between you and some cocktails, so I want to make this as impactful as humanly possible. As was said, my name is Mark. I run an organization called Negotiations Ninja. We train, coach, and develop content on negotiations. It's what we do every day, all day long. And I want to make sure that with your time with me today, you're getting as much out of this as humanly possible. And I want you to think about what the possibilities could be with negotiations. We've discussed a lot over the course of our time together of where we are now. And if you go backwards in time and think about where we were 2, 3, 5 years ago, I don't think any of us could have imagined that we would be able to leverage psychological bias in technology through software to get better deals. That's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it. If you listen to what Ben had spoken about earlier today, if you listen to what Edmund had spoken about earlier today, the use of bias in negotiation is very powerful. It's what the predictive model of Arkestro is based on. It's based on that predictive bias. And bias is very dangerous and very exciting in negotiations. And I can tell you right now, because of the podcast that we do, interviewing the top minds in negotiation all over the world, that there is software that's being developed right now that would literally blow your mind. Think of this. In tail spend, for example, it's very difficult to manage, right? Usually it's the 80-20 principle. We don't look at it. But there is software that is in play right now in enterprise-level organizations where that tail spend is being negotiated deal by deal at parallel across the entire organization. Now, that doesn't sound like it's all that exciting, but let me describe to you the way that it currently works. Generally speaking, you would look at tail spend, you would consolidate it, you would award it to 1 or 2 providers, and then you would manage it off and on with someone in an MRO category, and that's kind of the end. But today, there is software where individual deals are being negotiated at scale, not sequentially, one deal after the next, but at parallel, simultaneously optimizing not only for the deal, but for all of the deals across the entire organization, across all geographies, at the same time. Humans can't do that. And leveraging technology, AI, ML, and also our understanding of psychology and bias in negotiations gets us to a point where the integration of technology, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and humans is so much closer now than it's ever been before. Dr. E was talking about this, where there's this gap between technology and people, that space that exists between. Everyone thinks that the future is far away. The future is here. People believe that this stuff will only be invented in 20, 30 years. I literally have arguments with people on social media all the time where they say, far-fetched idea, never gonna happen. You have to have this first. And I try to tell them, no, it's happening right now. It's happening today. You think that it's far-fetched. You think that it's only 20, 30 years from now. But if this is happening now, where are we going to be in 20, 30 years? And to be at the forefront of this right now in our industry, in procurement, in our discipline, is the most exciting time to be in our work. But because bias exists, and because machines aren't susceptible to bias, but can use bias against us, that puts us in a very sticky position. So if you're not utilizing technology to compete, you need to know a few skills to be able to manage your negotiations on an ongoing basis. I'm going to get into a very, very simple framework that I all want you to start using. And it's going to help you to manage not only your own bias, but it's also going to help you to manage your emotions. Because as shocking as it might seem, people make emotional decisions. In fact, most of our decisions are emotional. But then we justify them with logic. So we need something to check us in that process. We need a framework to allow us to stop making emotional decisions. Now, emotions aren't a bad thing, but only if you can manage them. So this is what I want you to start using to help combat that bias, to help combat your fluctuating emotions in all of the things that you're negotiating. It's very simple, but it's very effective. I want you to think, whenever you go into a negotiation, first, before you do anything, before you make a phone call, before you do any kind of research, before you think about the other party entirely, first I want you to think, what do we need? What do we want out of this negotiation? And by the way, those are two different things, but many of us conflate them. We think that they're the same thing. They're not the same thing. A need is a must-have item. A want is a nice-to-have item. For example, I need to get to my office in the morning so that I can do my work effectively. I want to get there in a Ferrari. I would love the Ferrari, but is it essential to being able to do my work? No. Now, each of these needs and wants, oftentimes we think that they're binary. They are not binary in much the same way that risk is not binary. And Dr. E touched on this a little bit. There's a level of acceptable outcome that we can get with each of our needs and wants. There's a range of acceptable outcomes that we can have with each of our needs and wants. And if we list them appropriately, let's think of generalized procurement needs, right? We can improve savings. We can reduce risk, we can reduce liability, we can improve IP terms. There's a lot of things that we may need or want out of a specific contract. But now each of these needs and wants needs to be defined. What does that actually mean? Like one of the things that often comes up when I train people, they say, improve relationships. And I say, great, that's great. We want to improve our relationships. But let's try and objectively measure that. What does that actually mean? So that we have to create a range of acceptable outcomes. So what's our worst case, target, and best case scenario? Now, a worst case scenario within the context of a negotiation isn't the world ending, right? The worst case scenario is the worst possible deal that we can accept. The worst possible deal that we can accept. In negotiation theory, we call it our reservation point. What's the worst possible deal that we can accept? Now, this point is the point just before we decide to walk away from the deal. So we've got to be very clear about where we want to walk away. And each of our needs and wants has that point, by the way. Maybe there's an improved savings that you want to get. Well, what is the highest price you'd be willing to pay for a particular thing, for example? Or what's the least savings you'd be willing to accept for a particular negotiation? Maybe it's about risk reduction. What is the most risk that we'd be willing to accept for a particular project? Each of these needs and wants has a worst case scenario. Now, our target scenario is where we think the deal is most likely to end up. With the advent of technology and things like Arkestro, this becomes more challenging because if someone's utilizing very complex predictive bidding, then we need to be very aware of where we think, based on our research, the deal is most likely to end up. And then the best case scenario is where we think is the best deal that we could expect within the realm of possibility. Right? We all want the best thing ever. I want a golden toilet seat and 12 puppies, and I want my wife to appreciate it when I go shopping for her. But we're not always going to get exactly what we want because we're thinking about what it is within the realm of possibility that we're negotiating in. Now, all of this is colored by, of course, the environment that we're in, the geopolitical environment that we're in, the market environment. We're in an inflationary environment. So all of that has to be adjusted, and that makes each negotiation framework that you develop unique. You cannot paint one negotiation framework across multiple different negotiations the same way, because each negotiation is going to be different to what you want to do. This framework allows you to create discipline in your negotiations. It stops you from making emotional decisions when someone wants you to do something. If you've got a snapshot in front of you of what you can and cannot do for each of the needs and wants that you have, it becomes easier to manage all of the things that you're doing on an ongoing basis. But that's what we need and want. What about the supplier? What does the supplier need and want for us to create a mutually beneficial outcome? Notice I said mutually beneficial. I'm going to make a controversial statement that some of you may not like. Win-win negotiation is the biggest lie that's ever been told in the negotiation world. Here's why. Because win-win presupposes that the exact value of the deal can be completely known. Almost impossible. It also presupposes that in order for it to be win-win, you have to get 50% and I have to get 50%. Also impossible. It also presupposes that if I have more leverage and power in a negotiation than you, I need to advocate for your needs so that you get 50% of that deal. Also impossible. Now, mutually beneficial is different, because mutually beneficial requires you to advocate for your needs and me to advocate for my needs, and in the process, we make a deal that makes sense for you and for me. But that is not win-win. In the process of trying to achieve a mutually beneficial outcome, I need to understand what you need and want as well, which means that we actually have to have a conversation with each other. And now, I know that many of us are anemic to the idea of having conversations with salespeople. But in order for us to get to an outcome that makes sense, we have to. And many of those conversations come through our implementation of something called targeted open-ended questions, where we deliver questions to someone, ask them targeted questions related to their needs and wants and our needs and wants, so that we can understand, can they actually provision for my needs and wants? And do I actually know what their needs and wants are? Do I have a good understanding of what they actually want to get out of this? And I will tell you this, many of the suppliers that you work with may actually have no idea what success looks like for them. So having that conversation at the beginning of the negotiation to understand what they really want to get out of a negotiation is critical. Now, this helps you to manage your emotion, and it's going to be a good bridge to get us to a point where technology and humans get together more closely, and we can utilize technology better in the future. And until that time, I want to understand what you got out of this. Because selfishly, I want all of you to walk away with something here that you're actually going to use. You've all come here and you've gotten some great ideas. But what is one thing that you got from this presentation today from me that you think would be valuable in understanding about how you're going to be progressing your negotiations in the future? Let's just do, I'm going to do it by quadrants because we're kind of separated into four. Let's start here first. Is there anyone here that got something out of this where they're like, oh, okay, yeah, I can see how this would apply to my business? I'm going to block the light. Yes, go ahead.
Everyone has biases.
Yes, everyone has biases. And what does that mean? It can be both powerful and dangerous. We need to be aware of our own biases, and we also need to be aware about how we can use the bias of others so that we can drive more value. Let's go over here. Thank you for that. That was great. Anyone from here? Yes, go ahead.
You just said what does success look like for you? I mean, it's basic and it's words, but
Yes.
actually going to your supplier that you're negotiating with and asking those questions, I think will generate a lot of powerful conversation.
Yes.
Particularly if you're trying to make it a mutually beneficial relationship.
I agree with you. And by the way, don't be satisfied with just a surface level response from your supplier. I call it the politician's response. You know, when someone from the media asks a good question of a politician and they kind of answer the question, but not really. This, like, what are the challenges your organization faced during COVID-19? Typical answer, well, it was a tough time and we stuck through it as a team and one step in front of the other. Okay, well, that actually doesn't tell me anything. So tell me more. Help me to understand what actually happened in your business. Don't let them get away with surface level answers. From this group over here, what's the one thing that you're getting out of it? Go ahead.
The future is here.
The future is here. Amen. Praise the Lord. Over in this group, what did you get out of this presentation?
Also asking the supplier what they want.
Mm.
That's already been said, but I thought that was very powerful.
Love that. Fantastic. Sorry, go ahead, Mike. Win-win is a fallacy. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. Support. Wonderful. All right. I want to chat with each of you. Many of you I've had a chance to chat with at some point in time, but I want to have a chat with each of you. We may get to do it in the cocktail hour, but if we don't, I want you to reach out to me if you have any questions at all with regards to negotiation. I'm happy to have that discussion with you at any point in time. Thank you for your time today.